Okay, so I wanted to go through some of the information about the rubric for the projects and some of the contest details. I've got a few people that are out, and then I've got a few of you that are already kind of stressing and worrying. And so I thought I would get this out to you sooner rather than later. And we'll go over this for those of you in class on Friday. This will give you a chance to maybe think about whether or not you have any questions. The first thing I want to point out is if you go to the student packet, what you'll see is there's a contest checklists and evaluation forms and project rubrics for the class grade. Those are two different things, right? Because remember, there's a grade for my class, and then there's the checklist for the contest and the contest evaluation form. So part of what I'm going to do is we're going to start with the due dates. This is in your student packet. And you can see right here, we've already gone through most of these, right? We're coming up on the completed project due. You'll have your personal reflection for the second quarter coming up on the 9th. And then the contest, like the outside judges, are going to be on the 12th. The big thing that I wanted to point your attention to is that the Dallas area contest, finally, they have a date. That's going to be February 18th. So just kind of FYI. Now let's go over this is the preliminary contest project deadline. You can read this for yourself, so I won't read it verbatim. The idea of December 6th is, number one, to give me time to grade the project so I don't have to rush through it. This gives me essentially a couple of weeks before Christmas break for me to get my grading done, so I don't have to be grading a ton of stuff over the holidays. So I'm going to begin that process. Now, it's not going to be done on the 6th, so don't come to me on the 7th and say, have you graded my project? Because I probably haven't yet. So you're going to have to give me some time. I would not expect it until the next week, honestly. Now, the 6th is also going to serve a purpose as a preliminary kind of contest. Part of the purpose of that is that we have a number of submissions this year. I think I did the math and there's like 20 something. That's a lot of submissions, right? So that's way too much for, 3 or 4 judges to get through. And the reality is it's difficult to get that many outside judges to come in for just a simple school contest. So by doing a preliminary contest, it's going to help me kind of weed through some of the projects that are not even remotely contest ready, right? The reality is that that's the way it's going to be. Every year I probably take about 4 or 5 projects. I think the most I've taken in the last few years was 6. And that was because there were a couple of ties, and that part of that was because of my own, I hated to tell people no when clearly there wasn't a huge difference between them and another group. So you're talking, not that many projects are going to go. So there's no reason to have the outside judges go through 20-something projects when we're only looking at maybe 3 or 4, at most 5 going. So this serves several purposes. So the first thing I want to point out is I want you to register your project via Google Drive. You'll click on that link just like I did, and you can see that the History Day registration takes you through this, what type of project it is, what's the title. If you have a website or a documentary, you should put your link right there, your Weebly link or your YouTube link or whatever it is. If I want to see your confirmation that you understand the guidelines and expectations to be considered, because if you don't follow the rules or you're way far off from the rules, you're not even in the running, right? Put your name here. You can have one person fill this out. There's no reason to have everyone fill this out. So you get one person to put their name and then they fill in everyone else's name. This allows me to have the group members' names. And so you'll put that there and hit submit, and that's pretty much it. So it's pretty quick and easy, relatively painless. The benefit to that is it will let me, it'll streamline things when I get ready to register those that are advancing to regionals by kind of getting some of that information into a spreadsheet. You can see here that all projects will be prejudged. Now, the preliminary judging on the week of the 6th, that's going to take place. I'll have a little input into that. I'm going to try to get some of the other history teachers to judge, or maybe some of the English teachers. So I'm going to pull some people in just kind of randomly. So I'm not going to make these decisions unilaterally. I'm going to get some other input, maybe get, Mr. Mitchell or Miss Settle or Mr. Sterling to help me kind of sift through who really deserves to advance to the regional contest. So I just kind of wanted to let you know that. The outside judges on the 12th are coming from Eastfield College and Texas A&M Commerce. And so they're primarily going to focus on the top projects that we here at the school decide. And really what we'll probably do is narrow that down from about 20 something, and we'll probably cut it about in half. So if we can get it down to around 10 or so projects, then I think that's very doable for the judging staff. So your exhibits need to be brought in the morning of the 6th and set up. Your performance, I'm going to need to get with the performance group. I mentioned the other day that we were going to have to talk about this. There's only one performance. And so I think what I'm going to do is on the 6th, I'm going to get somebody, maybe one or two other people to help me judge the performance during activity period. So I'm going to get with you guys probably tomorrow in order to talk about setting that up. So you're and I can be flexible whether it's first or second activity period. Websites and documentaries, just submit their link. I'm going to be forwarding that link. I've got some people from other places, some other professors that I'm friends with that have judged History Day at the regional level. I'm going to have them look at the websites and documentaries in advance to kind of help me narrow that down. And so I want to be sure that you're aware that that's what I'm doing. Now, once this is done, you can choose, like if you have a website, obviously documentaries, I think it's a little more difficult, but with websites, you could technically go in and make changes. But I want to be very clear that if you have a website and you go in on December 8th and like, oh, I really want to tweak this before, because I think I'm going to be a contender for regionals or whatever, and you go in and change something and somehow you don't advance to regionals or you don't get the grade you think you should have gotten, understand that I grade when I go through and grade it. That's when I've graded it, okay? When the preliminary judging takes place, that's when the preliminary judging takes place. I can't be responsible for anything that happens between the 6th and the 12th as far as how it affects your grade or how it affects advancing to regionals. My strongest suggestion is really to leave it alone till after the 12th. You don't want to have to get in that position. So I just wanted to be sure and have that disclaimer out there. So I will need, for documentaries, exhibits, and performances, I need one copy of your annotated bibliography, just one. Okay, I don't need 3. I know that the contest rule book, when you go to regionals or state or whatever, you usually have 3 or 4 copies. For our school purposes, we just need the one copy. So you need to make plans for that, either by sending it to me and requesting that I print it for you, or by printing it at home, or by using your prints at school, something like that, okay? So be sure that you're doing that. You'll want to look at the guidelines below. You can see here, it kind of goes through some of these steps that you need to do, and also reminds you that even if you are not present, your assignment is still due. We've been working on this for a whole semester. Obviously, nobody has any papers, so that's not an issue. So be sure you look through this and familiarize yourself with what you need to be doing as far as the contest prep, okay? Now, the next thing I want to point out, I mentioned that you have your contest checklist and evaluation form. So I'm not going to pull up every single one. You can see here, you can see, evaluation website, rules verification sheet website. So really the rules verification sheet is like a checklist for you before the contest, for you to kind of walk through, kind of make sure. In past years, I've had people sign off on that. But this year, I don't think I'm going to, because of the way the rubric is set up, and I'll show you that here in a second. I don't think this is so much necessary. But I do strongly suggest that you look through here, make sure that you're meeting all the guidelines. Okay. So that's something you need to be taking a look at. Also, you have this is a sample of the judging sheet. I have that for the 4 categories that we have people in. So when your judges are judging you, right, this is what they're going to be looking at. So for them, their rubric is pretty straightforward, right? They're looking at very specific things. They're checking superior, excellent, good, needs improvement. So their evaluation sheet is not nearly as complicated as what my rubric sheet is. So I wanted you to kind of have a sense for what that's going to look like. And so that's kind of the checklist, what the evaluation forms are for the contest purposes. Now, as far as my rubrics, okay, so if you're thinking, okay, well, I don't really care about the contest, all I care about is my grade, and that's perfectly understandable, okay? So if that's the case, you go to the project rubrics. Now you can see there's an Excel spreadsheet. That's what I initially pushed out to you. This comes from the History Day teacher resources, but I don't like the Excel spreadsheets, and I think they're kind of wonky to use. Plus, it's not divided up in a point scale that I use, right? So, excuse me. So what I'm going to do is what I did was I created it on a Google Doc, right? And I created it as a table. So essentially, in a nutshell, you have categories, and they're basically 5 points apiece. And you can kind of go through whatever your specific category is, and you can see you've got analysis interpretation, that's 5 points, primary sources, that's 5 points, that has to do with argumentation, historical context, that's 5 points, historically accurate, 5 points, balanced in presentation is 5 points. The annotated bibliography is 5 points. You have relation to the theme at 5 points, and drawing conclusions at 5 points. So you basically have, and presentation clarity, right? And you can see the visual presentation. So that's pretty straightforward. You can see the specifics that are written there. And that they're mostly the same. There's a few minor variations between categories. So you'll want to look over the grading rubric to really get familiar with it. And it's essentially the same rubric as what's on the spreadsheet. I just kind of created it in a way that to me visually made more sense. So either one, really, it's going to say the same thing. The biggest difference with the Google Doc version is that it does break it down according to the 50 points that are available for the History Day project. So kind of look through that and familiarize yourself. Now, the big thing I want to point out, rules compliance. I'm not awarding points for rules compliance this year. And in past years, I have. That's been a very small portion of the points. This year, because of the way this new rubric, and this is a new rubric for me, by the way, the way this breaks down, it's easier to simply deduct points for rules compliance. And really that makes a lot more sense because, if you're making something for History Day, you should be meeting the guidelines. You shouldn't be rewarded for something you're supposed to be doing. This isn't a question of, am I going beyond the rules? Well, you can't really do that, right? You can break the rules, but you can't really go beyond them. So the way this works is that if you meet the guidelines, there's 0 deduction. If you attempt the guidelines, which, most people that have issues, that's where the problem's going to come in. So, if you have rushed through your documentary and it's gone over 10 minutes, that's where I would deduct points, right? I will be a little gentle as far as word count. So if you have if your word count on let's say your website is 1,250 words, I'm not going to deduct 5 points for that, maybe 1 point, right? you're talking very little to none. But if you're clearly like going too far over, you're getting to 1,300 words or 1,350, then I'm going to deduct 5 points. If you clearly have disregarded the guidelines, I'm going to deduct 10 points. So what this means is if somebody completely disregards the guidelines and just gets something put together and it's a decent product, then I can at least award a grade with a point deduction. So I think that's a relatively fair way to do this. There'll be a place for me to put strengths, opportunities for improvement, and a place for your final grade. And I'll do this very much like I've done the other rubrics that I've pushed out, where I'll fill this out, I'll make a copy, fill it out, and then share it with the people in the group, so that way you guys have access to it. So this is what the project rubrics look like. So I wanted to be sure that you were familiar with those. Again, you need to be sure that you're looking through all of the stuff in the student packet. It's all here. The rule book is here. The infographics. I think a lot of you have not really been going back to this student packet. I told you at the beginning of the year, the student packet and the NHD website, those were going to be your best friends. And this is where all that stuff is. So be sure you go here, start looking at that, and kind of making sure everything's taken care of. Now, I will at some point be pushing out a peer evaluation, and I need to actually revise this one. This is an older one. So you will have an opportunity to evaluate your peers based on participation. And what this will do is, assuming that there's no issues, then it's a non-issue. But if you have somebody in your group that has failed to really do what they're supposed to do, what I will then do is deduct a few points from that one person's grade. That is, if there's a unanimous agreement that one person, what I probably would do is pull people aside and try to figure out exactly what happened. But that's kind of my idea with the peer evaluation. So I think that makes it pretty clear for you what it is you're going to need to do. So for those of you who are gone on Friday, listen to this. If you have questions, you need to come find me. Ask me questions, email me, something like that, so we can get it figured out. Hopefully this will help you. You should have tomorrow, so try to listen to this tomorrow. So like I said, if you do have questions, you can get answers to them.